The moment his hand moved, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. It was a small motion, barely a shift of fingers, but in the quiet of the private gala lounge, it felt like a strike against glass. Victor Harrow, the billionaire whose name floated across news tickers and boardrooms, reached toward Lena Shaw with the easy confidence of a man who believed the world always leaned in his direction. Yet the silver service tray she carried did not move. It gleamed under the low golden lights, still and steady, catching reflections of crystal glasses and velvet shadows. The tray became the only object in the room that seemed honest, a simple tool of labor, inside a space built on decorations and illusions. Minutes earlier, the lounge behind the main gala had hummed with quiet elegance. Soft music leaked through the thick walls. Guests in sparkling outfits drifted in and out, trading careful smiles. The air smelled faintly of citrus polish and expensive perfume. Everything was staged to signal wealth, comfort, superiority. But here, in this corner, something darker pressed against the edges. Lena stood in her uniform, crisp clean, designed to blend her into the background, and waited for Harrow's next request. She was trained to be calm, trained to keep her shoulders straight and her step silent, trained to let guests feel as if food and service simply appeared on command. And he was trained, in a different way, to believe that nobody would ever contradict him. Harrow's voice was smooth, but beneath it lay the kind of tone that promised trouble. "Come closer," he said, too quietly for others to hear. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It never did. Lena didn't move. She adjusted her grip on the tray instead, her fingers tightening around the cool metal. The tray gave her balance, something solid when everything else began to tilt. Harrow leaned back in the leather chair, studying her as if she were part of the decor. "You're doing good work tonight," he said, and the compliment carried a weight that bent the air. He wasn't praising her performance. He was measuring her reaction. Lena felt the shift instantly. Workers learned to sense danger long before it arrived. Her pulse stayed steady, but something inside her sharpened, forming a line of quiet defense. He rose from the chair. The soft rustle of his suit sounded too loud in the small room. "Relax," he murmured, stepping closer than a guest ever should. "Nobody will bother us in here." The contrast was painful. His power, her position, his ease, her vigilance, his assumption, her reality. Lena took one small step back. He followed. The tray between them caught the light, a thin silver barrier reflecting both their faces. His looked confident, hers looked calm, but her eyes, steady focused, held a warning he failed to see. "What are you afraid of?" Harrow asked, almost amused. "I'm being friendly." Friendly, a simple word wrapped around something dangerous. He reached out, not forcefully, just a gesture, just a touch waiting to happen, but it crossed the boundary she had every right to protect. That was the instant time froze. Her breath slowed. The room's quiet deepened, like the world itself was watching what she would do next. Lena didn't look at his hand. She looked at his reflection in the tray, a distorted image of a man who believed rules bent for him. And then, without raising her voice, without breaking posture, she shifted the tray a few inches. A small motion, but deliberate, controlled, enough to interrupt his reach and make him snap back in surprise. The air changed. Even the lights seemed to pause. Harrow stared at her, stunned by the resistance he had not expected. The lounge fell into absolute silence. Guests on the far side of the room stopped mid-conversation. Every eye drifted toward them. Lena inhaled once, steady and clear. And then she made a decision, one the room would remember long after the night ended. Gold light dripped from the chandeliers like melted praise, warm, bright, and completely hollow. That was the truth of the gala. 20 minutes before the gesture that froze the lounge, everything shined, and none of it was solid. The ballroom was a masterpiece of surface beauty. Waiters moved in smooth lines, guests laughed on cue, and cameras flashed whenever Victor Harrow stepped into view. He carried the charm of a man used to being applauded, the kind of leader magazines called visionary, without ever asking who paid the price for his vision. Against the glow of expensive decor, his tuxedo almost seemed like a uniform of power. Every handshake he gave was a performance. Every compliment was calculated. People leaned toward him with quick smiles, eager to be seen in his orbit. But underneath the charm lay something colder. The staff knew it. They moved carefully whenever he approached, as if an invisible warning hung in the air. Lena Shaw noticed it the moment her shift began, the way workers lowered their voices when Harrow passed, the way managers stiffened, the way a busser quietly changed direction to avoid him. The room smelled of citrus, champagne, and silent caution. The gala celebrated a new investment fund meant to change the future. The slogan appeared on banners, napkins, and screens. Guests praised Harrow's leadership again and again, not realizing or refusing to admit how much of his empire was built on fear. A soft music track slipped through the speakers, steady and harmless. But the real rhythm of the night pulsed through conversations near the center tables. Rumors of how Harrow had fired a whistleblower last quarter, jokes about how fast he could erase a bad story, whispers about the careful blind spots in the building surveillance system. Only the main ballroom had working cameras. The hallways did not. The private lounge did not. That gap was known by people who needed to know. and ignored by those who didn't want trouble. It created a kind of shadow inside the brightness. Harrow thrived in that shadow. His charm stayed polished, but his eyes followed the staff with a level of interest that didn't match his public image of respectful leadership. When he noticed Lena for the first time, she was moving through the crowd with her silver tray. The tray caught a streak of light, sending a quick flash across the floor, like a small signal that something honest had slipped into a dishonest room. Harrow's gaze locked onto that flash, then onto her. He excused himself from a conversation with the senator, adjusting his cufflinks like a man preparing for a private game. He crossed the ballroom with calm steps, eyes scanning the crowd to make sure no one important was watching. The band played louder at that moment, but the sound only made his movement stand out more. Figure walking through music that refused to welcome him. Lena felt the attention before she even saw him. Years of working these events had sharpened her instincts. Something in her posture tightened, though she kept her face still. Harrow stopped beside her, lowering his voice to something meant for her alone. "I need assistance in the lounge," he said, polite enough for the public ear but heavy with private intention. He stepped back, guiding her toward the dim hallway. The crowded ballroom faded behind them. The music thinned, stretched, and then softened into a dangerous kind of quiet. By the time they reached the private door, they were alone. Lena Shaw had learned to stay calm long before the world ever handed her a uniform. That calm began as a survival skill, something her mother taught her in a small apartment where the walls were thin and trouble traveled fast. "Hold your center," her mother used to say. "People will test it. Don't let them move you." The words settled inside Lena like anchors, and they followed her into every room she ever worked in. Long before the gala, before Victor Harrow's shadow stretched across her path, Lena lived in a neighborhood where noise was constant. Car engines, loud arguments, music leaking through broken windows, everything competed for attention. Yet Lena learned to build a quiet inside herself. It wasn't silence from fear. It was silence from strength, the kind that let her think clearly when others rushed into panic. She grew up watching her mother wipe down counters at dawn before heading to a job at a community center. Her hands moved with patience, even on the days when exhaustion tried to slow her. "Dignity," her mother would say, "isn't given. You choose it." Lena watched and listened. Those early lessons shaped her posture, her voice, her way of walking, all steady, all intentional. That discipline became her shield later in life. Work mattered to her not just for income but for identity. Every shift she completed was a step toward a future she wanted to build. A small savings account, maybe a degree someday, maybe a life where she didn't have to measure every risk 3 times. But even with her strength, Lena had seen the world's sharp edges. She watched her mother deal with people who smiled with gentle voices but carried quiet contempt. She saw how certain strangers used politeness as a mask, how praise could hide a trap. Her mother warned her early, some people hide cruelty behind gentility. You'll know them by the way they talk when no one is listening. Lena never forgot that at 16. She experienced it herself when a supervisor at her first job tried making friendly jokes that weren't friendly at all. She remembered standing there, a tray in her hands even then, feeling the same shift she would later feel in the gala lounge. A manager later told her to let things go if she wanted to keep her hours. That was the day Lena learned how quickly institutions protected the wrong people. Still, she refused to let bitterness shape her. She worked hard. She stayed focused. She trusted her instincts, even when others asked her to ignore them. Those instincts sharpened with every shift she worked at high-end events. At first, she thought wealth might mean fairness. She soon learned it only meant the stakes were higher. The rooms were prettier, but the risks were the same, sometimes worse. And on the night of the gala, Lena sensed danger the moment Victor Harrow's eyes lingered too long. She felt the pressure of the environment, the hidden surveillance gaps, the powerful guests who could rewrite a story with a single phone call, the managers who valued reputation more than safety. This wasn't just another shift. This was a trap disguised as opportunity, and she knew exactly what she stood to lose. Her job, her income, her safety, the thin but steady path she had carved toward a better life. One wrong reaction could place everything she'd worked for at risk, but one right reaction, one clear stand, could protect something even greater. As she followed Harrow into the dim corridor earlier that night, Lena felt her mother's lessons moving through her like quiet instructions. Her grip on the silver tray stayed firm, as if the weight reminded her she was not powerless, not invisible. Her step didn't wobble, her gaze didn't fall. She held her center, and in the stillness of her mind, she heard her mother's voice again, gentle but firm, reminding her of the truth that shaped her entire life. Silence is the first thing they take from you. Victor Harrow's first wrong step was not the reach of his hand, it was the certainty in his eyes when he decided no one would stop him. The private lounge behind the gala was built for quiet deals and quiet misconduct. The carpet softened every footstep, the lighting dimmed every shadow. Cameras did not reach this room. Managers rarely entered it. Harrow believed that made him untouchable. Lena Shaw stood near the small bar counter, her silver tray resting against her palm. The tray reflected the warm lights, the glassware, and the faint outline of Harrow approaching behind her. She felt the shift in the air, a kind of pressure. low and steady before he even spoke. He closed the door with a soft click, the sound too gentle for the danger it carried. Music from the ballroom leaked through the walls as a distant pulse, almost like a warning heartbeat. Haro took a step closer, straightening his jacket as if preparing for a business conversation. "You work with such focus," he said lightly. "I admire that." Lena didn't respond. Her training taught her to stay polite, but her instincts taught her something more important. Stay alert. He circled around her, slow and deliberate, as if testing how close he could move without resistance. "You must deal with so many demanding guests," he continued. "People who don't appreciate you." "But I do." His words sounded smooth, but they landed with the weight of expectation. Lena kept her spine straight. She had seen this pattern before: the pleasant tone, the careful compliments, the step-by-step shrinking of distance. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. That was what made it dangerous. Haro rested a hand on the bar counter beside her, blocking her path without touching her. His body language said, "This is a private moment. You owe me your attention." He lowered his voice. "You know, most people in this room would give anything to be noticed by me." Lena recognized the shift, praise turning into leverage. The same game her mother warned her about. "I appreciate the recognition, sir," she said, steady but cautious. He smiled, not kindly. "I want to help you," he said. "People like you deserve a chance to rise. People like you," a phrase that carried too many hidden meanings. Haro stepped in closer. "All it takes is a little trust, a little cooperation." His tone tightened around the last word, turning it into a quiet demand. Lena's heartbeat quickened, but her posture held. Calm didn't mean numb. She felt every threat wrapped in those sentences. She understood how he expected her to react: with silence, with submission, with fear. But fear didn't guide her. Clarity did. She lifted her tray slightly, creating a thin line of space between them. The metal edge caught the light, shining like a boundary drawn in plain sight. Haro, surprised, paused for half a second. Then he chuckled softly, as if amused by her resistance. "Relax," he said, tone shifting again. "No need to be tense. I'm being generous." Generous, another word that tried to cover something rotten. He leaned in, not touching, but too close. "Tell me, Lena, do you want to stay in this job? I can make that happen, or not happen." The room compressed around them. The air grew still. Her future, her savings, everything she had worked for seemed to balance on the edge of his sentence. But something else balanced there. To her sense of self. Lena inhaled slowly. Her mother's voice whispered through her mind like a steadying hand. "Hold your center." She stepped back, not much, but enough to break the moment's false intimacy. Enough to show she saw through him. Haro's eyes chilled. He wasn't used to obstacles. "I'm offering you a real opportunity," he said, softer but colder. "Don't make this difficult." Lena kept her tray lifted between them, her gaze firm. She didn't look away. She didn't bend. The silence stretched, sharp as glass. And then, just over Haro's shoulder, Lena noticed something in the room: a small microphone pack left on a chair by a careless technician. Its tiny light blinking faintly in the dimness. Or maybe it was the unguarded side door leading back toward the stage. Or the heavy metal service cart near the wall, its wheels unlocked. A tool, an exit, an opening, something she could use. Her breath steadied. The unthinkable suddenly seemed possible. The next 3 minutes would break the perfect shape of the Galahad. Victor Haro never saw them coming. Lena Shaw stood in the private lounge, the silver tray still lifted between her and the man who thought the room belonged to him. Behind Haro, the tiny microphone pack blinked like a quiet pulse, a fragile spark of truth waiting to be used. It was the kind of tool no one expected a waitress to notice. But Lena did. The hallway outside hummed with muffled music and polite laughter. But the lounge felt sealed, heavy with the weight of Haro's confidence. He moved with the ease of someone protected by money, connections, and the silent agreement of people who didn't want to cross him. "Let's not drag this out," he said calmly, as if they were negotiating a contract. "I'm offering you something valuable." Lena didn't answer. Her eyes flicked only once toward the microphone pack. A small black device, a blinking light, a chance. Her heart beat faster, but her thoughts stayed sharp. She remembered every warning her mother ever gave her about people who used politeness to hide control. She remembered every soft threat wrapped in compliments. She remembered what was at stake: her job, her future, her dignity. And then she remembered something else, a truth her mother repeated. Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just one clear decision. Lena took that decision. She lowered the tray slowly, forcing Haro to step back an inch. Not enough to alarm him, just enough to reset the balance between them. Haro raised an eyebrow. "Good," he said. "Now we can talk." But Lena already had a different plan. She stepped sideways, moving toward the chair where the microphone pack lay half buried under a folded jacket. Haro mistook her motion for nervous compliance and didn't follow. "I understand," Lena said carefully, keeping her voice even. "You want privacy." Haro nodded, pleased. "Exactly. See, you're smarter than they give you credit for." That sentence sealed her decision. Lena reached the chair. Her hand moved lightly, quickly, as if adjusting service items. In that single motion, she slid the microphone pack into her palm, pressed the switch hidden on its side. and slipped it beneath the edge of her silver tray. A faint click told her it was active. She didn't need to know which channel it broadcast to. She only needed to know one thing. The tech crew outside rarely muted anything fully during a live event. Somewhere, maybe on the stage, maybe in the main hall, maybe in the speakers overhead, this microphone had a path. Harrow walked closer, misreading her quiet as surrender. "Let's have a real conversation," he said, stepping into the space she had just left. The microphone captured every word. Lena tightened her grip on the tray, not out of fear, out of purpose. The tray, once a tool of quiet service, had become a shield, a mirror, a carrier of truth. Harrow leaned in again, lowering his voice to the same tone he had used moments before. "There you go. No need to pretend. I can make your life easier, Lena, much easier, but only if you're willing to meet me halfway." His words, meant to trap her, now traveled farther than either of them knew. Lena stepped past him, not toward the door back into the lounge corridor, but toward the door that opened directly onto the side of the main ballroom stage, the route used by staff and technicians. Harrow blinked. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, a hint of irritation slipping through his polished tone. "To do my job," Lena replied, steady and controlled. She reached for the door. Her fingers brushed the cool metal handle. One push, and she would step from the private shadows into the public light. Harrow moved to block her, quicker this time. Lena didn't. For the first time, she met his gaze fully. Not angry, not shaken, simply certain. She pushed the door open. Light from the ballroom spilled into the lounge like a sudden flood, bright, loud, alive. The music pulsed. The crowd buzzed. The stage microphone still hung active from the earlier speeches, humming faintly with open channels. Lena stepped into that space with the silver tray in her hands, the hidden microphone broadcasting from beneath it. Her voice stayed quiet, but the room didn't need volume. It needed truth. "Excuse me," she called out, her eyes sweeping across the attendants, guests, and staff. "There's something that needs to be heard." The tray trembled, not from fear, but from the force of the moment. The blinking microphone light disappeared into the reflection of the tray's surface. Behind her, Harrow froze. For the first time all night, he hesitated, because he didn't know how much the room had already heard. A ripple went through the crowd, the kind that meant people were listening before they even understood why. Harrow stepped into the doorway, eyes wide, voice stuck in his throat. In that single instant, he realized the truth. He was no longer in control. The room was listening. The words hadn't fully formed in the air before the entire ballroom shifted, tilting, tightening, listening. Lena Shaw stood at the edge of the stage stairs, the silver tray still in her hands, the hidden microphone beneath it glowing like a spark waiting to ignite a storm. Behind her, Victor Harrow froze in the doorway, his charm stripped down to raw panic. For the first time all night, the room noticed a waitress more than it noticed a billionaire. The gala crowd reacted not with shouts, but with something far more dangerous: silence, a deep, collective breath that stretched across the ballroom and pulled every gaze toward Lena. The senator stopped mid-sentence. A hedge fund partner lowered her glass. A reporter, one who had been bored seconds before, raised his phone without a word. The music faltered, then faded, as the sound crew turned toward the stage, confused by a voice they hadn't scheduled. Lena's voice was steady, clear. "There is something important you all need to hear." The microphone beneath the tray carried every syllable forward, scattering them across the room like shards of light breaking through dark water. Lena didn't speak details. She didn't need to, not yet. The real shock came from the tension in her tone, a tone that said something happened and the crowd knew exactly who she had just stepped away from. Victor Harrow tried to recover. "Lena," he called out, forcing a calm smile that twitched at the edges. "There's been a misunderstanding. Let's step back inside." But the microphone caught his voice too, amplified it, twisted it into the very thing he feared. Public gasps rippled through the ballroom. Guests exchanged quick, sharp looks. The same people who praised him minutes ago now watched him with suspicion, their minds racing. Wealth had given Harrow power, but it also put him on a stage far taller than the one in front of them, and now every eye could see the cracks. A woman in a blue gown whispered, "Why is she speaking like that?" A man beside her answered, "Because something's wrong." Another person asked, "Was she alone with him?" A fourth responded, "Why would he follow her out here?" The room's questions multiplied like sparks catching dry wood. Harrow stepped forward, still trying to control the narrative. "Everyone, please, there's nothing unusual happening. Our staff is simply but a guest." Near the front said loudly, "Then why is she shaking?" Lena wasn't shaken from fear. She was shaking from the weight of truth pressing against the moment. But the misinterpretation was enough to topple Harrow's last shield. The reporter moved closer, eyes sharp. "Miss, did something happen in the lounge?" Harrow's expression cracked. "Put your phone down," he snapped, too fast, too harsh. It was the worst thing he could have said. Every phone in the room rose like a field of tiny mirrors. The truth didn't need to be explained yet. Its outline alone was enough to flip the entire evening upside down. One guest whispered, "She's trying to tell us something." Another countered, "He's trying to stop her." A third added, "This is going to be a story." The room that once applauded Harrow now studied him like a case file. Lena took one step forward. The soft pad of her shoe on the stage floor echoed more than any speech given that night. "I need to speak with management," she said, voice firm. Immediately. It was not a request. It was a claim, a direct call for accountability in front of hundreds of witnesses. Harrow lunged forward as if to grab her arm, then pulled back at the last second when he remembered the whole room was watching. Every move he made now carried consequence. He forced a smile again, but it looked like a mask slipping. "Everyone, please. Let's all calm. Someone repeated, incredulous. Another voice spoke louder, "Let her talk." And just like that, the power in the room shifted. Not to the senator, not to the investors, not to the man who owned the company. To her. To the tray in her hands, to the voice that refused to disappear into silence. Then the crowd parted, not for applause, not for ceremony, but for the slow, deliberate approach of gala security. Their black uniforms cut through the golden light like a warning. Every head turned, every breath held. And no one, not Lena, not Victor, not the crowd knew who the guards were coming for. The room's silence felt heavier than the chandeliers, an entire world holding its breath for one woman's next words. Security approached with steady steps, their black uniforms cutting a path through glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. Lena Shaw stood at the center of the stage's side ramp, framed by the silver tray she still held. The hidden microphone beneath it remained active, a quiet witness shining through the reflection on the metal surface. Victor Harrow moved toward her from behind, wearing a mask of patience that barely covered the panic beneath. And now management was hurrying over to, pulled by the storm gathering in real time. Three forces closing in, one voice ready to meet them. The head of security stopped first. "Miss, we need you to step aside," he said, unsure who he was supposed to protect. Lena didn't step aside. "I reported something," she replied, calm and clear enough for the crowd to hear, "and I will say it again in front of everyone here." Her voice shook the room more than any music that night. A manager rushed over, whispering harshly, "Lena, let's go to the back, right now. We'll talk privately." "No," Lena said, not loud, but unmovable. "Privacy is how people get hurt." Phones were already recording. Guests leaned forward. Some looked horrified, others curious, others determined to capture every second. The gala, designed for celebration, had turned into a courtroom without walls. Victor forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous," he said, stepping beside her. "She's upset about something. I was trying to help her." The room studied him like a puzzle missing pieces. Lena lifted her chin. "Help," she repeated softly. "You cornered me in a lounge with no cameras. You blocked the door, and you told me my job depended on cooperation." A ripple swept across the ballroom. Shock, anger, recognition. Victor snapped back. "That is not what happened. You're twisting my words." "Then let's play them," Lena said. The microphone under her tray blinked again. Its red light, a tiny symbol of truth cutting through the dark. The tech crew, already aware something was wrong, scrambled to reroute the feed. The speakers let out a soft crackle, and then Victor's voice filled the ballroom. "I can make your life easier, Lena. Much easier. But only if you're willing to meet me halfway." Gasps cut through the room. A glass clinked against the floor. Phones rose higher. Victor's face drained of confidence. That wasn't too or taking it out of context. Lena kept her voice steady. "There is no good context for harassment." The manager stiffened. The security team exchanged uncertain looks. The crowd edged closer, the lines between guests and witnesses blurring. Victor stepped forward, grasping for control. "She wanted attention," he said sharply. "Look at her, she walked out here on purpose, trying to embarrass me in front of my investors." Lena held the tray against her chest, not as a shield but as a reminder of reality. She came to work, not to fight a billionaire. The tray's silver surface caught the stage lights, reflecting the crowd back at itself, wealth staring at truth. "I wanted to finish my shift," Lena said. "I wanted to work. You wanted something else." Victor turned to the crowd. "You don't know her. She's lying." Before Lena could answer, another voice rose from the back. "I saw them." Everyone turned. A young busser, quiet, unnoticed, until this moment, stood with hands trembling but eyes firm. He swallowed hard, then spoke louder. "I was in the hallway when he followed her into the lounge. I heard him tell a supervisor earlier this week that he liked picking the right kind of staff. I didn't say anything before, but I'm saying it now." The room erupted not in noise, but in clarity. Truth had cracked open the night. Victor spun toward the busser, pointing sharply. "You're making that up? Do you know who you're accusing?" "I know exactly who," the busser replied. "And I'm not the only one." A woman near the front, a former employee of Harrow's company, lowered her gaze. Tears gathering, she whispered, "I remember that tone, that pressure." Her friend squeezed her hand. "Speak," she urged. But she didn't need to. The crowd understood. Victor's final defense collapsed in the space of a heartbeat. In that charged stillness, with witnesses rising and phones capturing every truth, the weight of Lena's voice settled across the gala like a final verdict. Victor opened his mouth to deny again, but the room no longer believed him. and his empire of charm fell apart the moment an unexpected witness stood beside Lena, proving she was never alone. By morning, the glitter of the gala looked different, like a costume someone had forgotten to put away. The night's chaos had melted into headlines, the statements, and shaky video clips posted by guests who were still in disbelief. Victor Harrow's confident smile reappeared everywhere, but now it played beside the recording of his own voice, sharpened by truth, and in the center of it all stood Lena Shaw, holding the silver tray that had carried more than drinks. It had carried the moment that changed everything. Before sunrise, investigators arrived at the hotel, legal teams, compliance officers, company representatives who suddenly spoke in low, careful tones. For years, Harrow's reputation had been treated like polished stone. Now it cracked under the weight of witness accounts, employee stories, and the undeniable tension in his recorded words. Lena answered questions in a small conference room near the lobby. Her voice stayed steady, not because she wasn't tired, but because clarity became her only anchor. A manager sat across from her, nervously tapping a pen. "This situation has escalated quickly," he said. "The company needs to conduct a full review." Lena nodded. "You should." Her calm pushed the manager into silence. Power worked differently in daylight. Outside the room, staff gathered in small clusters. Some whispered apologies to Len, apologies for not speaking up sooner, for seeing signs and ignoring them, for trusting power over truth. Others looked at her with a mixture of awe and guilt, understanding that her choice had carried risks they were afraid to face. Lena didn't blame them. She knew fear wasn't a weakness. It was a cage people learned to survive in. Victor, escorted through a side corridor, avoided eye contact with everyone. His voice, once smooth and commanding, now sounded thin as he muttered to lawyers. One investor confronted him at the elevator. "You said these rumors were exaggerated." Victor didn't answer. Some truths become heavier in public. Lena watched from a distance. She didn't feel triumphant, only resolute. She hadn't come to destroy him. She had come to protect herself, and by doing so, she uncovered the cost many others had been paying in silence. Later that afternoon, upper management met with Lena privately. They offered her options: time off, reassignment, even compensation. All sounded like attempts to tidy the mess instead of fixing the pattern. "What do you want to do?" the HR director finally asked. Lena looked at her hands, then at the silver tray placed on the table beside her. Its surface still held faint fingerprints, smudges from a night that forced the world to listen. "I want change," Lena said. "Not just for me, for everyone who works here. Policies, training, actual protections, real accountability." The director hesitated, then nodded slowly. "We can discuss reforms. The board is preparing to remove Victor from his position. This may be the time to rebuild." Lena breathed out, not in relief, but in acceptance. She had not fought to return things to normal. Normal had never been safe. She stood, picking up the tray. The metal felt lighter than it had the night before, less a shield, more a symbol of what courage could carry. As she walked through the quiet hallway toward the staff exit, sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching the tray's reflective surface. It shone not with perfection, but with honesty, the marks of use, of work, of a moment where silence was broken. Lena paused, hearing her mother's voice in memory, the same voice that had shaped her strength. "Hold your center." She stepped outside, knowing the road ahead would not be easy, knowing change would take time, knowing she had risked more than most people would ever see. But she also knew one thing with absolute clarity, something she had proven with a single act of truth in a room built on fear. Truth, spoken once, can outlast any empire built on fear.